Jamie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
good to have you back to the Sisterhood. We love it.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for asking me, guys.
So you've had a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is the story of everyone's life all the time. But yes, this has been a fun season for me. Yes.
So great. And you're writing books and you're doing all sorts of things in COVID, which is just so impressive. And
Well,
we,
I'll let you make that decision later if it's impressive or not. But yes.
well, so Jamie, most people know you, I think, who are listening, but for those who don't, just give a little snapshot of your life and who you are, what you do.
Yes, I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm married to my husband Aaron for 19 years. So we just say all the time, we can't believe we're about to be married for 20 years, and it feels like that, like we just snapped our fingers and here we are. But when you say 20 years, that's a long time.
I know.
I was saying that to my parents the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, we're 45. That's a long time." I was like, "I know, it seems so crazy." So we've been married almost 20 years. We have four kids. Three in high school, one in middle school. So we are in my favorite stage so far of parenting, hands down, by far. It has different stresses than when they were little. I'm actually, I like to tell moms with little kids, like, you're tired when you have little kids, but it's different. I'm tired now because my kids never go to bed. And so
It's
they're
so
like,
true.
they're so up. They want to hang out. They're
Yeah.
watching TV and movies, and we love being with them. And so we've gotten to where, like, guys, listen, this was mostly during the summer. We're like, we've got to go to bed. Like, we cannot do this midnight, 1 o'clock every day. So
I know.
anyhow, we have four kids. I have the podcast, The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, and my husband and I just started hosting another podcast. And I'm an author. So there's the fun life that we're living these days.
Yeah, I saw that you started a new podcast with Aaron. That's so awesome. So tell us a little bit about what it's about.
It's called On the Other Side. And we've been dreaming about this podcast for a long time. In fact, we did our first interview for this show last November. So
Wow.
we have been working on this, and we've pushed the release date back three or four times. And so it just released in August. And it is where we sit down and interview people about what life is like on the other side of something. So not necessarily the story of what happened, but what life looks like now. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So great. Well, we brought you in, Jamie, today because we're in a Leave Your Mark series where we're talking about how, like, what does it really mean to leave your mark in the world? I mean, that's a great concept. We're all like, inspired when we see these quotes on Pinterest, but what does that really mean to leave your mark? And so, can you talk to us a little? Let's start off here of just why is it impossible to leave your mark if you are not leaning into who you are?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that you would live a really hard life, first of all, if you're
Mm,
just constantly, and we can talk about that for days, if you're constantly wanting to live someone else's life or have someone else's giftings or talents or job or family or ministry or fill in the blank, um, you would live a very unsatisfied life. And it would be almost like we use that example of like a hamster in a wheel. I feel like, and we use that example like, God, life is so busy. I feel like I'm on this hamster wheel. And I understand that a bit, but also I feel like we can feel that way when we're constantly yearning to be someone else. So it's the
mhm.
striving that you can never get there. So I think that would be impossible to leave your mark because you wouldn't even know what is my mark. Like, what am I here for? Um, I remember this became so evident to me. And I think this happens to us the older we get. Tragedy strikes, and you go, okay, so in an instant, everything can change. And it makes you reevaluate. Am I leaving a mark? Am I living the life that God asked me to live? Am I, if I were to leave today, is this what I would have wanted to have done? And about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, a friend of mine died. Suddenly, tragic, four kids. And I remember thinking, her funeral was so beautiful, sad, but so beautiful. And I left there going, she lived her life well. Like, she did everything that God had called her to do. And it seems crazy to us that she didn't get to live longer. But I left there going, I want to be able to say, I lived my life well. Like, I
Mhm.
did exactly what God asked me to do. And I think we have these kind of wake up calls when something unexpected like that happens. We go, okay, so I don't have as much control over this day to day world as I thought I did. And it causes you want to lean into more what God's asked you to do with your own personal life.
Mhm.
So, for the average woman who feels like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, I don't know where to begin, how do you coach her to know who she is so that she can then leave her mark in a way that is unique and purposeful and impactful?
I think that the thing that's hard about that is that we live in a world where we have our phones with us. They're never more than a foot away from us. I mean, if I'm like, "Where's my phone?" I have like a panic, like, "Where's my phone? Oh my gosh!" We live our lives where we have this device with us, and the device is fabulous, and we all do things that this device helps us with, and I'm a fan of it, all the things. But we also are very well aware of what we think everyone else's life looks like. And so even when you're trying to decide what's my calling, how am I going to live my mark, what am I supposed to do? We have seemed to have created this standard of, well, let me look at what everyone else is doing. And then if she seems happy, if she seems successful, if she seems like people like her and she seems like she has influence, I guess I'll be like her because it seems to be working for her. And so there's this trap in the cycle of, I want to figure out what God has for me. And the only thing I think I have to figure that out by is by what everyone else is doing. And so the very first thing I would say is we've got to stop looking around at what other people are doing to try to figure out what we're supposed to do. I have a friend years ago who used to say the need is the call. And what he meant by that was look around, like what are the needs around you? And that just might be your calling in that moment. And for me personally, something that's helped me so much is to realize that I have this ultimate calling on my life as a follower of Jesus, and that is to make him known and bring him glory. So there have been stages in my life where my what I was called to was 4 children and giving them 8 million snacks a day,
Yeah.
finding their favorite Elmo episode and changing diapers and doing all the things. And that's where I was supposed to be at that moment. And in that moment, I could make God known and bring him glory with that. There have been other seasons where I have stood on stages and taught the Bible. And that is exactly where God wanted me to be. And so all that to say is, for you to figure out what am I supposed to be doing? I think we've got to separate ourselves from what she is doing and look around, be like, okay, God's placed me here. He's given me gifts. He's given me talents. I see a couple of needs in my community, my church, my home, my workplace. How can I step into those? And that's when we start to feel satisfied and successful, is when we're doing where God things where God has placed us and not trying to be someone else.
It's interesting you talk about, watching what everyone else is doing, and you brought up the phone. And it is true that we have a different front row seat to people's lives than we ever have. And that makes things different. And we also have this culture of like fame, Instagram famous, or right, and Twitter famous, whatever it is. And so people often feel like, well, if I'm not that, then it's not successful.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the great lies of the digital age. So, can you talk a little bit about that and how we fight that? And as someone who has a big platform, I mean, you have a big platform.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is it maybe like on the other side for you?
Yeah. I always like to think about when I think about success, and we can talk about this with anything like a successful mom, parent, Instagram, or whatever you think might be successful, is it's a moving target. It never is the same for everyone, and it never stays the same. So I remember so you mentioned a platform that I have on Instagram. And I value that platform as a part of my ministry. So it is like, how can I use it to bring God glory and make him known? That is what I think about with Instagram for me personally. And I remember when I had like, 1,000 followers and 5,000 followers, every number, I was like, if I can get here, then I'll be successful. And I don't feel that way anymore, because what I have found is that when you get to wherever it is, you feel the same as you did the day before.
Yeah,
You know
it's
what I
true.
mean? Like, it's not like you get
Mhm.
1,000 followers on Instagram and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I like my body. I like my marriage. I like my job. Everything's great. It's like, oh, I
Hmm.
feel the exact same as I did yesterday. And so there's this idea that success, whatever it might be, is going to change things. And I have just found that if I will change my mindset to, I want to be faithful. I want to be faithful where God has called me. And so when I'm faithful is when I do feel successful, when I do feel satisfied. And you know what? I was faithful when I was teaching fifth grade Sunday school 12 years ago. I'm faithful today when I'm on your podcast. I'm going to be faithful tomorrow, whatever God brings me to. And to me, that is how I cannot chase whatever she has. Because I look at my own life and I'm like, but God didn't ask me to do that, and he put me here in this moment for this time. And how can I use what he's given me? So I've had encouraging women. How do we shift that from this equals success to whatever I'm doing? I'm striving for faithfulness. I'm striving for faithfulness, and that's all I can do.
And faithfulness is success.
It is. It's your success. Like that's the thing is that success meter always changes. And so for me, even if I think about something that's really important to me right now, and it's launching my children into the world, having a 16 and a half year old, it's like right there. I can feel it. It's coming. And so when I think about what does it mean to be a successful parent, my immediate thought is, well, when my son leaves my house, he has really great manners. He understands how to handle his money. He's kind to everybody. He makes great grades. He gets a good job. He gets married. They have a couple kids. I'm a grandma. Like, you know what I mean? You go down the list and you think that would make me a good parent. But the truth is, I'm not guaranteed any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not guaranteed how my kids are going to react to their own lives. But what I can control is to be faithful in my parenting, to make God known and bring him glory with every decision that we make with our kids. So that's actually brought me a lot of comfort, because this is what I can do. God, I can be faithful to you.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging to a lot of our listeners who have older kids and are walking through that, to remember that we cannot control our children who have that darn free will. And
totally do. Yes.
And our job in our free will is to respond to God in that moment, and to respond to our kids in a way that honors him and honors them.
Yeah. I know this is a little off subject from what the series is about, but it's about what we're just talking about here. I remember a couple of years ago, someone looked at me and they said, Jamie, you cannot save your kids and you cannot damn them to hell. And I was like, okay, so I am not responsible for what they choose to do. I'm not responsible for the choices. I'm going to just present to them the best I can, the truths I know to be true about God, all the things that comes. And then I then can be faithful. And that just took a lot of weight off of me to be the best mom that I possibly could. And then really just trust God with the outcome and know that I'm going to mess up, but that doesn't mean that my kids are messed up. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be awesome some days. And that doesn't mean I'm going to create awesome kids, I'm totally just going to be faithful.
That's right. Oh, I love that. I love how you boil that down, Jamie. It's so helpful and so practical, and something we can just keep like right there at the forefront of our minds. But I have a question for you. So, okay, if you say like my job is just to be faithful, and if we think of ourselves as trees, and I know you use this in your book, how do we know then if we're producing good fruit? If maybe we're not seeing results, especially the results that we thought we would see, and maybe we aren't seeing, then how do we know?
You just made me go grab what you made me do. Okay, hold on real quick. I know you guys will edit this, or you can keep it out. I'm ready. Okay, so you were talking about trees and fruit, and how do we know if we're creating good fruit? And this is so good, because you mentioned fruit and trees, and we know this from the Bible. Jesus talks about this in John chapter 15, and he says, I am the true vine, my Father is the vine dresser. I'm going to read this real quick. Okay, guys. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go down here. Sorry. Look, you got me a little off. Here we go. Ready? Verse 4. Abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. So we want to bear fruit. We want to bear fruit in our parenting. We want to bear fruit in our marriages, in our workplace, in our communities. Like, we want to bear good fruit. God wants us to bear good fruit. But this really was so good for me a couple of years ago when I saw this, is that Jesus, what he's saying here to his people, his disciples, us that are following him, his command to us is not to bear fruit. His command is to abide.
Yeah.
His command is not to do all the amazing things. His command is to abide. And then it says, whoever abides in me and I in him, it is he that bears much fruit. That is encouraging to us, because here's our job as people, is to abide in Jesus. It means to be with him, to dwell with him. And so when we do that, we're going to produce good fruit, which is encouraging to me, because I can be a person who's like, I'm going to make sure I'm doing all the most amazing things. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm being an amazing wife, an amazing mom. The mom's hard for me because, like, I don't do cupcakes at school. I don't like field trips. So then I feel weird. Like, I don't know if I'm an amazing mom. Those are hard. But what I can do is I can abide in him, and then he's going to produce that fruit in me. And I think that's encouraging to people, because especially for your listeners who are like, checklist, I'm going to do all the things. You can't do them on your own. You can't continue to do them on your own. You might for a little bit, like that can't sustain. But the good news is that if we're dwelling, if we're abiding, if we're with Jesus, he's going to produce that fruit in us. Fruit we could never produce on our own anyways.
Yeah, and I think about, I've been actually studying this summer a lot about just the idea of seasons, and that we produce fruit, in a lot of scriptures say in season, and that in season is an important thing, because I think we often toil expecting quick results because we like quick results, but that actually, nope, it's in season. So that season might be coming and might be later. And maybe the story you're living now is preparing you for that harvest later on. So let's transition actually into that. Jamie, can you talk just about how your story, I'd love to even just hear personally, how you feel like your story has informed your calling?
Yeah. Early on when I started following Jesus, one of the things that was super hard for me was trusting that he would use me. And I think that a lot of people feel that way. And so I by no means feel like that I'm the anomaly here. Trusting that he would use me. I brought a lot of baggage into my marriage. I brought a lot of baggage into my becoming a person who like was wanting to minister to people at church. And so I just really struggled with that. And I had some people who specifically stuck it out with me. Like, they poured into me. They believed in me. They didn't think I was less than because of maybe some sin struggles or things I've been through. And that really, really affected me to know that these people were for me. And so it's funny that you asked that, because I didn't actually connect these dots until about 2 weeks ago. And so these people believed in me, and they were for me, and they were always for like my story mattering. They were never like, how about you just keep this between us? It was never like, hey, you'd be better off if you didn't talk about this. That was never said. I never felt like that with them. And one of the things that I feel like has been so beautiful with what God's done with the happy hour, my podcast, which has then led to all these other things that he's allowed me to do, is I'm a big believer in stories. And I think stories change the world. And I think when the three of us sit here and we talk about what God's teaching us or stories or what I'm learning, there are people that are listening that are going to go, oh, I know what that feels like. Or, okay, if she can say that, I can say it. Or if she can confess or forgive or whatever that might be, I think I can do that too. And so I didn't, like I said, I didn't connect these dots until a handful of weeks ago, actually, that I believe those women that did that for me started something in me that now I yearn to do so much. Like, I yearn to have people be vulnerable with their stories, not on a podcast, not in a book, but with their people, like with their friends, with their people they do life with. And that's what I'm constantly encouraging people to do. And I look back and I think, they did that for me. Like, they encouraged me to be vulnerable with them. And that has transpired into everything I like preach about today, which is we can be open with our friends because Jesus is better than all this. Like, he's better than the worst thing you've ever done. And when we understand that, we can value each other in community. And so the point of this story obviously is what you're saying to people and how you're treating them matters. It can change their whole life.
Totally.
Curious, when you were sharing your story with other women, I'm assuming a lot of them were women, and were they saying, I don't know how to say this, were they saying it's okay, it doesn't matter that you did these things or these things happened to you? Or were they saying, no, actually, these things are shaping you in a beautiful way and a unique way that God can use? Was it, or was it a combination of both?
I think it was definitely, how do we see God using this to make something good out of it? Like, how do we see God using this in some way? And, that's talk about, leaving your mark, even what you guys are doing this series on. A lot of women are going, okay, but I didn't choose what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that this is a good conversation because I have a point. I didn't have a voice in that. And I understand that on some levels. And this is what I always say to that is that like God is not out here saying, you know what, I'm just going to make all these things happen to you and just put a smile on your face and use it for my glory. But God is actually like saying in his word, he says this is like, I'm going to make something good out of this. What you thought was to do for evil, for harm, I'm going to actually do something good about it. And I remember interviewing Beth Moore earlier in the year, and she said this to me. She said, I would never want to redo some of the things I've been through, but I can look back and see that God has made much of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the vulnerability that I talk about with women having in community together is not this idea of, okay, let's just throw everything out there and let me just air out all my dirty laundry. And then everyone just be like, okay, you're cool. Like, awesome. Thanks for telling me. But it is always to point us to the one who takes care of that dirty laundry. It's always to point us to Jesus to do that. I heard a podcast with someone recently and they were talking about, the woman who was caught in adultery, John chapter 8. And they were telling the story, and this was on a podcast. And they said, this is what they said. They said, the good news is that Jesus didn't care about her sin. And I said, and I thought to myself, well, that's not true. Like Jesus always cares about sin. Like Jesus cared about sin so much that he had to die on a cross for that sin. Like Jesus cares about our sin. And so that misconception that we can be vulnerable and there's just like, let me just show all these things is not how God works. He doesn't condemn us for our sin by any means, but he can use it. And that's what I'm talking about is this idea of telling our stories and walking hand in hand with a group of women to say, here's where I'm struggling with. This is what I'm struggling with. And then I can look at her and say, here's how God's better than that struggle. Here's how he's with you in that struggle. Here's how he's going to redeem this mess. I hope that makes sense. I always want to clarify as I speak a lot about vulnerability and I do it from behind a microphone. I'm never asking anyone else to do that behind a microphone. The three of us just have these unique jobs and callings that God's put on our life. But I think a lot of women are just yearning to have people to walk through life with that they can be honest with. That's what I want to encourage women to do.
So good. It's so good because what you're saying is, yeah, God cares about that and doesn't want you to keep living in that because it's creating a darkness that is just
Yeah.
not good for you.
Right.
But it doesn't sideline you, and
Exactly.
that's, I mean, it's like we were just talking about our football kids, and like it doesn't leave you on the sideline just sitting the bench, that God actually has a place for you on the field, a really key place for you to play.
Yeah.
And yet there may be some healing that has to take place before that can happen. And I think a lot of times we want to skip that part too, because that part's really hard.
Yeah.
And that really is sometimes really painful.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that as well, that there maybe are seasons of action and then there's just seasons where we need to pull back and really dive in and heal?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, even when I started being honest with things that God had done in my life in my early 20s, I mean, I was in my late 30s, and so when I released that first book, I remember some people would say like, is this a lot? Is this hard for you to talk about? And I'm like, I've already walked through this. Like I've already done this. I've already done the work and the healing. There are things in my life right now that I'm walking through that if they ever see the light of a day of a book, it will be for years from now, because I'm walking through that personally and intimately with a counselor or my children or my family, whatever that might look like in my own life. And so that is so true, is that there's this sense that everyone needs to just get out and say everything that they're feeling and they're doing. And I think that there is this unique sense that we need to pause and listen to the Lord on that. We need to pause and listen to the Holy Spirit and be like, is this a time for me to speak or is this a time for me to listen? Am I healed from this? And you know what? People have different opinions on this. A lot of people say like, oh, we can teach from the inside of our mess. I personally cannot teach from the like thick of the mess. Okay. Like I can't do it. Some people can, and that's great. But I think there is, like you said, there's a lot of time for healing and for us to walk through that. But here's the caveat to that as well, is some of my best healing and some of my best like things that God has done in my world have been walking through that hand to hand with a person with me, And so it's not this idea that I have to stuff everything in and just be like, God, I need you to heal me. And he can, and he will, but he is such a fan of community and he is such a fan of doing life together. with like-minded people. And so those best times for me have been when I have a trusted girlfriend that can walk through the darkest days with me, and not abandon me and point me to Jesus and show me the hope that's on the other
Mhm.
side.
Yeah, we need that from each other.
Yeah.
Often we can't see it in the middle of the darkness.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say some of my strongest healing moments have been when I have said things out loud or
Yeah.
I've written them. And so I know that somebody else is going to read or hear and respond to them.
Mhm.
And that's part of the healing process. So I echo what you're saying, that it is very helpful to be doing that with someone, recognizing that God is the only one who can heal our hearts. So
True.
we can be with someone who can reflect that gentleness and that goodness, that character of God back to us. But that person, whether it's our spouse or our best friend or our therapist, that person cannot heal us. Only God can do that. And it's this mix of the physicality of the people right in front of us and around us, and the Holy Spirit doing its work. And it's the mystery of
Yeah.
life, really,
Mhm.
in there.
Yeah. If I could change people's hearts and heal people's, I would,
Yeah,
because
me
I'd be like,
too.
I'll
For
take care
sure.
of you. Come over
For
here.
sure.
Come to my house. I'm going to take care of all this for you. I would love to be able to do that. Yeah. But no, we can't.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. One of the things I love about what we do, Jamie, both of us, is that we get to see how often people's stories turn into their callings. I mean, that if there is a theme in what I see podcasting, it is that people's pain is often harnessed for calling. They're intricately tied. So, what encouragement would you have for women who just feel like, yeah, that my story has sidelined me
Mhm.
and I don't feel like, God can use it because it's an absolute mess? What encouragement do you have for them?
I think that the truth is that who says whose story is the worst? Like who gets to say who's sidelined and who's not? You know what I mean? We
Totally.
put that on ourselves. It's never coming from the Father, ever at all. One of my favorite examples of that is from when Jesus meets the woman at the well, and he has an interaction with this woman at the well, a Samaritan woman who Jews would not have interaction with, and she's there alone. And here's the coolest part of that whole story for me is not even just that Jesus interacted with her and that Jesus met, but when she left there, we can assume that she wanted to be getting water from the well in the middle of the day to maybe be away from the other people in the community. We
Mhm.
don't know why, but we can assume that in a healthy assumption. But immediately after Jesus tells her, I'm the Messiah,
Mhm.
I have the living water, she goes back into her town, and many people in her town believed because of her. And I always think it wasn't just like 30 minutes ago that she potentially
Mhm.
felt like I'm sidelined, And so we see that Jesus comes in and says, girl, you're not sidelined. You head on back into town and you tell everybody what I did for you. And many people became followers of Jesus because of her story. And so we have this idea that what we've done or what's been done to us or the choices we make, they sideline us. And here's the encouragement I want to tell you, women who are listening to this, is that Jesus came down, he left heaven, he left the Father, he came down, he lived a life here, took on human form, and then he died for our sin. And so for me, when I think like, oh man, the things Jesus had to die for, I guess I'm out. Like, I guess I can't do anything. To me, it almost feels like I'm looking at Jesus and being like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Because what you did for me, it doesn't give me satisfaction. It doesn't give me joy. It doesn't produce in me what you say it will produce. Maybe I'm not believing it. And so I just want everyone to know, like, there's no one who gets to be on the committee of who's sidelined. Like, it's a fake committee. There's no committee. You're the only one on it. You are the only one on the committee of who's sidelining people. And so your story has not sidelined you. Like, you have been given a gift of influence, and maybe you get to use that to influence those that are around you right then. I just talked to someone recently, and she talked about how, I'm going to mess up her words, but she was saying exactly what you're saying, is that when you walk through something, you now have the unique ability to minister to the next person that's going to walk through that.
So true.
That's happened to all of us. Like, all of us have had someone go, I've been in your shoes, and here's how I overcame. Here's how I found joy. Here's how I did this. And you go, wow, that meant so much to me. And so you, as a person listening, whatever your story is, There's someone out there that's actually waiting to hear you say how you overcame, how you found joy, how you found love, how you forgave, fill in the blank. And you're going to be able to be a life changer for them through your own story.
Those are words of life, Jamie. Those are
You guys, I get
absolute.
so excited about sharing
Mhm.
our stories because I didn't used to think that my story mattered. And I didn't think that God would ever use someone like me. And then to think that people will listen to me share my story and go, wow, I didn't think I could do that. I mean, we all have a voice and we all have a story, and it matters. And it matters so much that there are people, honestly, here's what's crazy to think about is there are people whose lives will be changed when you open your mouth and tell your story. And I don't want to miss that. I don't want to miss the opportunity to be used by God in that way because I'm like embarrassed or shameful or scared. So those are all real feelings. I felt them all. But I also want to be a woman that's like, I'm willing to let God move through me in spite of how I might feel.
Well, and you think about the times where you have felt so in that place of fear or sadness or whatever it is, darkness. And when someone has come alongside who truly understands, who has walked somewhat in your shoes, it's like that C.S. Lewis quote that says, yeah, you too, or me too, or whatever that
Yeah.
is,
Mm-hmm.
that it's so incredibly comforting because they know your pain, but they're no longer in your pain. And it's just this brilliant combination. It's so
Yeah.
good. I
It's so
love
good.
it. Okay, last question, Jamie. How would you define leaving your mark in the world?
I would define it by what I would hope would be said about me. If today's my last day here, or if I get 40 more, like who knows? I would want people to say that I loved God with everything I had, and my desire was to make him known in everything I did. Um, I think that would be leaving a mark for me.
Mhm. So good. Well, you're certainly doing that, my friend.
Thanks,
And
guys.
your new book is fabulous. You Be You. So just say a little bit about your book before we go.
Oh man, I want everyone to know that they have the opportunity to be their unique self. That we don't have to spend our lives trying to look like someone, and I don't mean that just in a physical sense, although it could be like having what she has, having the job that he or she has, the life they have, the influence they have, the voice they have, the gifts they have. I think that when we spend our lives wishing for someone else's life, we miss all the unique opportunities that God has for us in our own lives. And so I want you to be you.
So good. So good, Jamie. Well, we always love having you on and are just so grateful for your voice and your influence in the world. Thank you.
You guys are kind. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.